read the book?
Ready? My name is Michael Rossell. Rossi. Something. My book is Off the Reservation, Stories You Almost Took to the Grave and Probably Should Have. As you can see by the yellow stripes, caution. If you're easily offended, don't read it. If you read it and you're not offended, you need a fucking priest. I decided I'm going to read chapter 14. It's called Like a Penis, Only Smaller. It kind of stands alone, so you can... Here, can you come over here? I like do it from the angle.
It looks good from the angle.
Oh, sorry. Alright. It stands alone. It's only about half as offensive as the rest of the book. Chapter 14, Like a Penis, Only Smaller. My attraction to bars... Oh, and you're not supposed to be drunk when you do these, and I'm shitting on myself. Bear in mind. My attraction to bars goes well beyond the alcohol that's served there or the women they attract. Like all of my other obsessions, I'm sure it comes from a movie, probably Cocktail with Tom Cruise. I've always thought that Cruise's character was kind of a pussy, but Coughlin, played by Brian Brown, had a charisma every man should aspire to. Coughlin's years of experience as a bartender had made him an expert on everything. He would dispense his knowledge and the advice he gave on all important matters, including calling it Coughlin's Law. Coughlin's Law, he'd say. Anything else is always something better. Coughlin also killed himself in the end, which of course, him giving the finger to a world he knew everything about. While other young men watching that movie wanted to be a poem-spouting, bottle-flipping Cruise, I dreamed of someday being Coughlin. For the nearly year and a half after I moved back from Seattle, any energy not spent keeping a roof over my head was expelled trying to get into bars before I was legally able. Although all of my friends were older than me when I headed west, only a couple of them did 21 at the time. Because we couldn't all get into bars, we'd always gather at one of our apartments. Now that I returned and they were all old enough for bars, none of them wanted to hang out in apartments anymore. Attractive, inebriated women you don't know rarely wander into your living room. Thus began my cat and mouse game with bouncers and doormen. At first, I stuck into getting into nightclubs because all you had to do was get past the door guy, and with the right wristband or stamp, you were home free. The bartender knew you had been carded at the door and therefore must be of age. The most effective plan was to simply let a buddy of mine, who looked like me, really nothing like me, go in first, and then afterwards somebody else would bring the ID out to me so I could use it. The key was to try to get behind a group of good-looking, flirty girls and hope the distracted doorman would not notice. But my biggest fear was the gaggle of hair-sprayed, slutty-dressed bachelorettes who would come up behind me in line. Bouncers never pass up on an opportunity to look cool in front of these young women, and they think scrutinize your driver's license, and outing you threateningly in total embarrassment qualifies as such. On only one occasion did the doorman ever notice the repeat use of the ID, and he simply threw the license back at me saying, "You're already here." We hung out at these nightclubs on the weekends, but on most weeknights my friends all gathered at Boomerangs, a flashy bar in the corner unit of a strip mall, with crocodile skulls on the walls, fried gator on the menu, and bartenders in tight neon green short shorts. These slightly sluttier than Hooters types of jobs are the stripper minor leagues, and at one time or another I would be convinced I was just one mediocre tip away from sleeping with all of these bartenders. Making sure that the staff at Boomerangs never found out how old I was became a second job for me. I started going in on the busy nights, and only until the door guy knew me and he would just usher me in. I had a terrible fake ID that only worked if I was a stranger to you, even then only about half of the time. The guy in the ID was named Eric, but I didn't know him. I'd gotten it secondhand. I made sure I met every single bartender, and I even memorized when they were likely to work. I became friends with the owner, the waitress, the cooks, and even the DJ. Whenever there was a new employee, I would ensure I was introduced before they could unwittingly ask for ID and bring the whole house of cards down. This was real work. I hung out at Boomerangs almost every single night. In addition to getting to know the staff, I became friends with all the Boomerangs flies. The many different types of barfly subcultures have always amazed me. A bar's first employees and customers will quickly define what kind of bar the new place is going to be. This is not unlike any other service business, but to make things interesting, heavy drinking, tipping, and drugs are thrown in. The three form a volatile cocktail, and when consumed by the human condition, the circus that emerges can be the greatest on earth. Among Boomerang's regulars were a couple named John and Angel. Both in their mid-30s, Angel was a really attractive brunette with a great figure and really sweet, motherly face. John was a big guy with a beard and growing beer belly. He looked a lot like a young Santa Claus, still years away from going white. On most nights, while John was over on the other side of the bar playing darts, Angel and I would sit and talk for hours. I would entertain her with stories about how I grew up, as well as the growing number of adventures to which I had subjected myself already in my short life. She would listen intently to my stories, with the kind of worried smile you get from a mother. She had 2 children of her own from a previous marriage. Ironically, Romano had been a divorce attorney. John and Angel would often talk about these great camping trips they liked to pepper their summers with. Angel would absolutely insist that I join them for one in the coming summer. John would say, "Yeah, you'll have to come here. You'll have to come with us and bring one of those pretty girls you're always talking to around here." He made it sound like it would be the time of my life. I also liked that he implied that I was always talking to pretty girls. I did talk to pretty girls at the bar quite a bit, but mostly about their boyfriends. One night, while hitting on one of these green pants bartenders, I brought up the camping, insisting that she should come with us. The girl let out a hearty laugh and then informed me that bringing a girl along wasn't a suggestion, it was a demand. It turned out that my new friends were swingers, something I had only heard of, was not altogether sure was real. I didn't know any swinger lifestyle specifics, and I can't really say I ever liked the idea of sharing anything, especially a wife. I did fantasize about sleeping with Angel, but I knew I was never going to talk a girl into bed with the 3 of us, as I could hardly talk a girl into sleeping with just me. I've always been a somewhat attractive guy, nothing special. I would kind of put my looks in the middle of the road category. I was thin at the time, not very tall or strong, with short blonde hair and blue eyes. Like I said, nothing special. Angel was definitely the best looking of the 3 of us, and although Fat John was a master at it, I had no idea how to lure a pretty girl into bed using another pretty girl as bait. I finally resigned myself to the idea that it was never going to happen, and so I just focused my flirting on Angel when John wasn't looking. A smart move, really, considering he was about 6'4", had about 100 pounds on me. I equated the term swinger with promiscuous, and I figured that if Angel liked me, it would only be a matter of time before I would get an opportunity to have sex with her. When you've never been a part of an affair, the idea of them sounds perfect and stress-free. One evening, while having a couple of drinks with John and Angel, they asked me if I wanted to go to a different bar with them called Fireside. Angel pulled me aside and told me there was a girl she knew there who was my age, or what she thought was my age. And she expected that we might hit it up. I immediately agreed to the meeting and said I would follow them to the bar, which was one town over. The drive to Fireside was too short and utterly nerve-wracking. I wasn't worried about the girl. I was worried that the new bar wouldn't let me in and everyone would find out I wasn't even close to being 21, still a year away. Lucky for me, the staff took me for older. I never even had to pull out my terrible fake ID when ordering drinks. Lots of them. The obvious setup was everything my young mind could hope for. The girl, Jane, was short and thin with dirty blonde hair and a sweet face that actually looked a lot like Angel's. Don't worry, you're not going to find out that the women ended up being sisters or anything. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't help that they looked like they could be. After a few drinks at Fireside, John suggested we head back to the house and have some beers in the hot tub. Of course they had a hot tub. What self-respecting swingers don't have a hot tub? If you're not aware of the importance of a hot tub in swinger lifestyle, every time I say hot tub, just picture the sea turtle you once saw on the Discovery Channel. The one that sits on the ocean floor with its mouth wide open, wiggling its tongue like a juicy worm, patiently waiting for a hungry fish to inadvertently wander in for a quick death. Jane and I jumped in my car and we followed John and Angel back to their swinger pad. We made small talk as we drove, finding out all the information pertinent and necessary for us to be naked together in about 15 minutes. This was an odd conversation. It was not as if I had picked her up and after a night of heavy drinking, I had talked her into a bad decision. A third party had arranged our imminent sexual encounter. One beautiful woman had convinced another beautiful woman to have sex with me, and I'd never felt cooler. When we got to the house, Angel and Jane disappeared into the bedroom while John and I grabbed a couple of beers and giddily started what appeared to be his routine. First, he went over and turned on the hot tub, which was actually inside the house, believe it or not. It almost completely covered the area where the dining room should be, adjacent to both living room and kitchen. Next, he turned the giant boxy television to VCR. If you don't know what a VCR is, you're probably not old enough to read the story anyway. Suddenly, I was standing next to life-size porn. I was scared, excited, curious, and grateful all at the same time. I was soaking in the glorious scene on the TV when John finally spoke. "Here's the rules, buddy," he said, towering over me. "We're all gonna play around for a while, but you can't fuck my wife and I won't fuck Jane, got it?" I nodded that I understood, even though I didn't entirely. What does play around mean exactly, I wondered. In my head, I just pictured myself having sex with the girls. This would be the first time it would even occur to me that there would be another penis present when all of this went down. Not just a penis with a man attached, but a giant, hairy lumberjack, who also happened to be Angel's husband, and now suddenly a seemingly very jealous one. This is an odd trait for a swinger, I thought, but I was the new guy here. I wasn't questioning anything. John the Beast quickly undressed and hopped into the tub with his beer in his hand. I stood there stupidly for a few moments, then stripped even quicker, jumping in as well. I'd seen John's horse-like penis out of the corner of my eye, so now I moved awkwardly, trying not to let him see my standard-issue junk. I pushed myself above the seat under the water and put my arms on the rib of the tub, letting my feet float to the surface under the bubbles. I positioned myself far enough away for John for two people to come between us and was pleased when he made no attempt to close the gap. I was feeling pretty intimidated by now. After a few minutes of me and John giving each other Masters of the Universe looks across the churning water, John and Angel emerged from the bedroom wearing only robes. The ladies disrobed and with no further ado jumped into the hot tub together and started making out and going down on each other. I'm in a porno, I thought. There was a porno on the TV to my left and a live porno right in front of me. I'd somehow found myself in a multi-dimensional sexual world I thought was reserved only for rock stars or billionaires. First, the girls played with each other for a while, then took turns playing with us. Then we all got out of the tub and went into the living room and got on the floor. For a while, I thought we looked like a sexy version of the movie The Human Centipede. Looking back now, I doubt it looked very sexy at all. After a bit, we paired off. John moved across the room with Jane, leaving me with his wife. As I had my head between her legs when I suddenly felt her pulling me up. As I came up to her face, she started kissing me and biting my ear. Put it inside me, she whispered. It's out with her. I figured she didn't need a review of the rules for me, so after a quick glance to John, who looked busy with his head buried between Jane's legs, I just went ahead and did as I was asked, thereby breaking the only rule I'd been given. I was pretty worked up at this point, with one eye on Angel and the other on her husband doing its giant groundhog imitation 5 feet away. I gave her about a minute and a half of what was likely the worst loving she has ever had. After I finished, I triumphantly rolled off, leaving her completely unsatisfied. I could see the disappointment in Angel's eyes when she quickly got up and motioned for John to come and join her in the bedroom, leaving Jane and I alone in the living room. Jane got on the couch and asked if I wanted to join her, so I did. After giving her equally lackluster, I'm just glad to be here sex, I fell asleep wondering if John was going to come lumbering from the room and kill me, having found out I had broken his only rule. In all likelihood, they were probably down the hall in their bed laughing together in postcoital bliss over my performance. What did it feel like? John would probably ask. Like a penis, Angel would snicker, only smaller. Then they would laugh themselves to sleep. In the sobering light of the next morning, nothing seemed right about the previous night's events. It was obvious that we were both uncomfortable as I drove Jane home in silence, a silence I only broke to gasp for directions. My head throbbed from my shame-laced hangover, and I couldn't wait to get her out of my car. As we entered the town where Jane lived and headed toward our apartment complex, her path seemed very familiar to me. When she directed me to pull into a lot with 4 buildings bordering it, I realized suddenly why I was so acquainted with the route. A couple of months earlier, I had slept with one of my sister's friends and taken her home to this exact spot. Jane directed me to the last building, and I pulled up and parked. Do you know Tina Miller, I asked? Yes, she shrieked, animated. You know Tina? She's my roommate. I don't know what she was so excited about. Having 2 mutual friends was more than enough for me. I never saw Jane again and didn't want to. Coughlin's Law. Never trust a girl who does the book on the first date. Rossi's Law. Have sex with only one person at a time. If the occasion arises when this is not possible, try to make sure you have the biggest dick at the orgy. That's it.
Very good.